All right, everybody. So now that we have all of our front end stuff taken care of, our world building, our plotting, our character development, a little bit of outlining, it is time to write. Let's get down to it. All right, so we're just talking about our draft one here. All right, so where do we start? How do we even get started? Well, we can start at the beginning. It's always a very good place to start. Just, chapter one, sentence one, sit down and start to write it out in the order of your outline. This is probably, what most people tend to do. Just kind of write chronologically from the beginning and just go straight until they hit the end. Probably the easiest way to write it, but everybody is unique. Everybody's got their own thing. If you don't feel like starting at the beginning, just start wherever is the most exciting to you. If you have a particular scene that you are just dying to write, you can start there. Why not? You can always work backwards. You can go in whatever order you want. There are no rules here. It's whatever keeps you motivated and inspired. As you all know, I have written a book, and I wrote it with a co-author. And right when we were first doing our first draft, one of us actually started from the middle. We just picked a spot. And because, we didn't want to like cross over each other's work as we were writing, we kind of like took turns flipping back and forth from perspective to perspective. But, one of us started at the beginning and one of us started in the middle and started writing towards the end. And that worked for us. We were fine with that. I mean, we had kind of an outline, an idea of where we were going. So it worked okay. We knew what we were doing. We didn't get confused or start going in totally different directions. But yeah, really wherever you feel like it, wherever your heart is taking you. So some key things to kind of keep in mind as you're writing your first draft. And this will help you really just get through it and not get caught up in the details and actually manage to finish a draft of your book. So it will be bad. And I can't remember where I heard this. It might have been Brandon Sanderson, but he might have been quoting somebody else. Even your favorite writers aren't as good as your favorite writers. They're not just going to like write a first draft and that is what is being published on the shelves. Nobody is that good. So everybody's first draft is a rough draft. The point of draft one is to just get everything out on the page. It's not going to be amazing. It's not going to be great. It's just going to be there. And the point of draft one is just to have something written down. You can edit it later. Lots of writers, especially first-time writers, they get stuck in this trap of rewriting their first chapters. They don't want to move on until their first chapters are perfect, or they get like a different idea and they want to start over and rewrite and rewrite and rewrite. It'll just get you stuck in this loop, this never-ending loop, and you'll never be able to move forward and you're never going to be able to finish your book. You have to force yourself onward. You can always take note of edits that you want to make later in the draft, leave little comments for yourself, but you have to get through your first draft. The goal is just to finish. A major downfall of novice writers is that they never actually finish the book. Either they get stuck in this trap of rewriting and rewriting until they're sick of it and they drop it, or maybe they're like halfway through this book and this new idea comes to them and they're so excited about it that they just want to like drop this book and start a new one. And that happens like a bunch of different times and they never actually end up finishing a book. If you want to get published, you have to finish a book. So something you might want to do is just tell yourself, no matter how bad this is, no matter how badly I want to just like move on and rewrite, I have to finish this draft of this book. And then at least you can do it. You finished one book. It might have been garbage, but you did it. You wrote it and you finished it and you can do it again. If you do it once, you can do it again. All right. So as you are thinking about writing your first draft, it's a great idea to give yourself deadlines. It kind of helps you move forward and kind of keep steady progress and not get bogged down or stuck somewhere. So whether you're enforcing your own deadlines or you have an agent or an editor who is giving you a deadline, it's great motivation. And you want to break down your deadline into manageable steps. And why not give yourself rewards or even consequences for not meeting your goals or deadlines along the way? So one way you can do this is generally what I do, is to set myself a word count deadline. And generally it's daily. So X amount of words a day, Y total words a month. Right now I'm giving myself 800 words a day. Not doing great, but it's still there. It's still motivating me. And it's not incredibly hard to get 800 words a day. You know, some people even just say, I got to write something today. I got to write at least one word today. Just sit down and put a word to a page. And that is something, and that counts. A really great tool that I don't even know who came up with it. But November is National Novel Writing Month, and somebody came up with this amazing program online, just nanoramo.org, and it has these built-in goals and the structure that you can follow to get you to write 50,000 words in the month of November. They give you little badges along the way. You can get into writing groups. There's a ton of great stuff that you can do with the NaNoWriMo program. And it's not just in November. I think they have Camp NaNoWriMo in like March or April, and then again in July. And then you can go on and use the site. You can create your own goals any time of the year that you want. It's really amazing. So if you're interested in word count goals, NaNoWriMo is a great place to go for that. If you want to be a little bit more broad with your goals, you can just kind of go with stages of your outline. If you want, you could do a chapter a week goal, or I want to finish Act 1 by this date, or even just draft 1 needs to be due at this time, so I'm going to finish draft 1 in 3 months, or whatever it is you want to do. So over here I have kind of my idea for what each draft should kind of be like. So this is kind of like moving on once you're finished with draft 1, kind of goals for the total overall completion of your project. And we'll come back to this when we're talking a little bit more about editing later. But just as a little bit of scope, draft 1 is just get it on the page. Just get your idea out there, learn about your characters, your plot, just start writing. Does not need to be good, it just needs to be there. Draft 2 is at the end of draft 1, you have some ideas of what you need to fix. You know, like this character didn't feel great. I want to tweak some stuff about them. This arc was a little weak. I want to add some stuff here. So draft 2 is all about the fixes that you want to make as you're reviewing. Draft 3 is giving it to a critique group, maybe having some beta readers, alpha readers jump in there, and draft 3 is implementing their feedback. And then draft 4 is polishing things up. It's totally fine to have more than 4 drafts. I would just, kind of caution you about more than 4 drafts. Like if you have a plan, you know exactly what you're doing, that's okay. But don't fall into kind of the same problem that we had about, drafting chapter 1 too many times with drafting your whole story. Because over editing as you're writing can prevent you from getting your book finished. Over drafting can prevent you from ever getting your book published. If you are just, rewriting and rewriting and rewriting your story, eventually you're going to kind of hit this point of diminishing returns where your story is not actually getting better, it's just getting different. And, some people get really overprotective, or they're a perfectionist, and they're really nervous about getting their book out there, and so they maybe just keep drafting and drafting. They want it to be perfect before anybody reads it, and that is going to just stop you from getting published altogether. At some point, you just have to kick it out. And if you're sending it to an agent or an editor, they're going to give you more feedback anyway, so don't do too much work, because eventually it's just got to be done. Okay, so let's just start talking a little bit about chapter 1. This is probably where most of you guys are going to start. So you want to try and get a hooky opening line, something that's really going to grip people and draw them in. You don't have to start off your book with like some crazy action sequence. You can if you want to, but as long as you have something interesting, something new, something catchy, where readers are like, oh, this seems like it could be an interesting story, that will grip your readers and keep them interested. In chapter 1, you want to introduce your character and their voice, give readers a sense of their personality. You also want to introduce your setting, introduce the world, but try to avoid info dumping. We don't need to know everything all at once, just enough to kind of tease us in, get us grounded. You can feed us more information later. And then you want to end on something interesting. It's important to end your first chapter with something that will make the readers want to keep reading. What happens next? Again, draft 1 is just about getting your stuff on the page. So you don't need to focus too much on a great opening line. You can just write if you want to. You don't need to, make sure that your character voice is perfect and your personality is sharp. These are just kind of good things to keep in mind as you're working on your first chapter. You can either outline your first chapter and kind of say, okay, we're going to start here, and then this is going to happen. They're going to meet this person, and then this is how it's going to end. Or you can just kind of write and just kind of keep in mind as you're going what you want to happen, where you want chapter 1 to end. And you might not even know until you write it. Just start writing, see what happens, try to end in an interesting place where you're like, ooh, okay, this is a good place to hook the readers, leave them hanging so that they'll want to keep reading for chapter 2. Just some notes on avoiding the info dump. This is just a general writing tip. There's definitely such a thing as too much information. It slows things down. Readers get bored when things are too slow. And, it doesn't really matter how cool your world is. If you're just sitting there talking for pages and pages and pages about this one thing, it can get boring. Now, obviously, there's an audience for everything. If you're a writer like Tolkien and you want to stop and focus on this blade of grass for a couple of paragraphs, that's fine. There are people who will read that. But for the majority, you want to kind of keep things quick and snappy, but like interesting. It's a balance that you got to strike. Good writing is all about motion. We will want to read about characters who are doing things. They're moving, they're acting, they're talking. They can be thinking, just not too much thinking, because then it starts to slow things down, getting stuck in somebody's thoughts. You want to see that something is happening. A good thing to kind of see to test how you're doing is if you're just kind of like skimming through your pages, and if you just have blocks of long paragraphs, you need to shake things up. Okay, so break up your paragraphs, have some dialogue here, take some action breaks, add some reactions, some emotions, some movement, and that'll kind of help keep the pacing good, which is another thing that we're going to talk about later. And a good thing to keep in mind as you're writing, and hopefully this kind of comes naturally, but to highlight your character's voice, the uniqueness of your character. Even if you're writing in third person, you're going to be in your character's head. You're going to describe their thoughts, their emotions, their reactions, and get that on the page. Are they sassy? Are they spunky? Are they sarcastic? As you're writing, write with their personality. The voice is the main thing that is going to hook your readers and make them interested in reading more, especially at the beginning of your book. They don't know much about what's happening. They don't know much about your character, your world. But if they start reading and they've got like this character who's cracking jokes or making sassy comments, even if it's like in their head, readers will probably be more interested in going along for this ride. And the voice that you are writing with, it kind of sets up the vibe for your book. So if your book is kind of like a lighthearted YA adventure, you're probably going to want a main character who expresses their personality a lot. They're funny, they're, youthful, a little spunky. But if we're going on some like epic fantasy adventure, then maybe your main character is going to be a little bit more serious, a little bit more stoic, a little bit more, contemplative about things. So just kind of go with the flow of your character, and that will help kind of pick up the interest of your first chapter. Okay, so, again, the main thing here is to just start writing, just get something on the page. These are some tips to just kind of try and keep in mind, but don't get bogged down with the details. Progress is progress. Doesn't matter how great it is, doesn't matter if you have a million typos, you are making your way.